I figured I'd do a short video and a few of the things I'm working on with my disaster area here. I've got stuff spread all over the place. Been doing a lot of sanding and polishing and getting ready to do some more hot bluing, but here is a gun stock that I'm working on. About 3 days into it. This thing looked terrible before I started. It was pretty dinged up, dented, had a break in the top corner. It's fun trying to do this on camera. Right here. Let's see if I can show you. It was broken off of there. So I repaired it. New piece of walnut glued in there. There we go. But the finish on this is just an oil finish. There's no lacquer, no varnish, no urethane. This is just strictly a boiled linseed oil finish. And what I do to make it look like that, here's my boiled linseed oil. I take the stock and get it all nice and sanded down, get it smoothed out with about 100 grit paper. And then I work my way up to about 120, then 220 grit, and then I finally get up to 320 grit, and I use wet paper, raises the grain up in the wood, and then I let that dry, and then I sand it again with 320 to knock the hairs down. And then what I do is get everything cleaned off, dried, and then I take my stain, and I actually apply my stain with the 320 grit sandpaper. And the reason I do that is because it makes a real fine slurry that stays behind. And I leave that on there for about 15 minutes, let the stain take. And then I let it dry, and then I wipe it off against the grain. And that way it leaves the pores filled with that real fine slurry. So I let that sit overnight. The next day I come in and I steel wool it with a, let's see here, real fine steel wool, and then I wipe it down with a towel I got here. And then what I do is I apply my first coat of my boiled linseed oil, and I actually use 400 grit to apply that. Real light, it doesn't take much at all. So I apply that, and I actually don't touch it. I let it dry overnight, and then I do the same thing. I come in, use steel wool, knock that down, and then the grain is filled really well. I mean, you can see it's almost glass smooth, almost. I'm not done with it yet. But then I start with just my boiled linseed oil, and it literally doesn't take much. It's about 2 drops on each side. I'll put a drop here, put a drop about right there, and use your hand, rub it in real good, let the heat from your hands spread it out. You don't want too much. Some people try to coat the whole thing with a bunch, and then it takes about 7 months for it to dry, and that's no exaggeration. But when you do literally 2 drops on either side, and I'll sit here and rub and polish it into the wood. There's probably a joke in there somewhere, but I'll polish it into the wood for about 15 minutes, and then let it dry overnight. Do the same thing. Come in, steel wool it off, do the same thing, and I'll do that probably, let's say, probably 2 more times. And we will then call that stock done. I've also got the forearm for it here. It looks pretty good. And again, this looked terrible when I started. Absolutely terrible. I think I might have some before pictures. I'll have to look. But a few other things I'm doing. I'm sanding and polishing all day. This is another gun that was blued. It was pretty rusted. I stripped all the bluing off of it. I had to file, stone, and sand and polish to get it looking like it does. I had to turn this in the lathe to get some of the pitting out of it. And it looks perfect now. Cylinder looks great. And then the gun for this stock, I'll show you that real quick, of all my stuff that I'm currently working on. This is the gun It's a little 22 long rifle lever gun. But you can see I've got it nice high polish. I'll be bluing it. The barrel, it's polished too, but I masked it off so I wouldn't bang it around when I was polishing the receiver. Got that. I'll be bluing this. Can't remember what in the world I'm doing with this. Okay, I've got to polish that for bluing. I've got to polish this one for bluing. I already blued this. I just had something else I had to do to it, but I blued that one a couple weeks ago. Turned out beautiful. Got some fingerprints on there. Well, hell, it's hard to do this with one hand. Well, LCP's missing a ejector, so I'm waiting for parts on that. The bodyguard here, this guy wants me to make a firing pin out of tool steel, so I'll be doing that tomorrow. This little gun's locked up. Oh god, there's a ton of stuff over here. A couple little receivers down there that I have to put these barrels on. So I gotta do that sometime next week. I'm going to be bluing this shotgun here. You can see how terrible this thing looks. That way you can get a kind of a before and an after. See, you see how bad that looks, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done with it. But the wood's not too bad, but it doesn't match. So we got to fix that too. And we got a Colt Python. Here's another one that I'll be bluing, and you can see why. It looks absolutely terrible. It functions fine. It just looks miserable. So I've got all that going on, and I've still got some jobs that haven't even been brought back to me yet. So as you can see, I stay busy. Take a look back here, and it's a disaster back here as well. But got 2 lathes, that lathe, milling machine head on that one, and then I've got the mini right here. And I've got my welding table, TIG welder all set up, sonic cleaner, stationary tub in the back, and then, well, it's we call that my easy bake oven. That's what I temper. When I harden steel and I have to temper it, I put it in there. So, I know it looks like a disaster, and it's because it mostly is, but that's what happens when you stay busy nonstop. But yeah, I just thought I'd take you guys, whoever's interested, and all 3 of you that watch this, haha, thought I'd take you for a tour. So thanks for watching, and I'll show you some updates later.